They told me that once you see Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 through high-res VR glasses, like the Pimax Crystal Light, you can never look at the flat screen again. What it didn't warn me about was the day 3 and day 4 wall, where the initial magic fades and the real work begins. Welcome back to the final chapter of my 7-day VR challenge with the Pimax Crystal Light. In our last episode we broke down how to survive being trapped behind plastic. Tackling muscle memory hacks, testing voice tools like Voice Attack and SimVoice Copilot, setting up VR-friendly kneeboards and managing CPU loads when rendering charts over Utah. But today is day 7. In the last few days I did several tests, and this is the final day of the test. And to test that theory of never going back, I turned my flat screen monitor back on. And tell you, it felt like stepping out of an open-air cockpit and getting stuffed into a cardboard box. Going back to 2D honestly feels like a regression. You realize just how much of the sky you've been missing. Today we're embarking on 5 extended, highly detailed flights across some of the world's most spectacular scenery updates. For each one, we'll start on the flat screen so you can see the limitation and then transition directly into VR to show you exactly why going back to a monitor is so painful. Let's break down the ultimate verdict. Who is this headset actually for? So the first flight we're gonna do is with the Cessna 172. So currently we're flying above the city of Utrecht, here you can see it. So let's make some turns and then let's see how it looks like. This is of course using the flat screen, right? Using the normal screen, although you might have a curved one, it looks like this. But soon we're gonna switch to, of course, VR. So here we can see cars driving by, we can see other stuff. Here's the front. You can see some other nice buildings over here. You can see some, let's say, energy companies. There's also a coffee factory pretty close by. And if we look over there, we can see the city center. And the city center, of course, contains some nice buildings. So let's also move around a bit. And let's see how it looks like without VR. Of course we will fly also with VR, but give me a moment because I first want to show you how it looks without VR. So you can do a good comparison with how it will look with VR. So you can see some buildings. Look at the large bank building. Turn further away. We're moving to that important building of the city of Utrecht, but you can see that it's, I would say, under construction. In the real life it's already finished the construction, but this is how it looks like. And if we look over here, you can still see that the scenery looks pretty amazing. But this again, right, if we go outside, is using, between brackets, the normal LCD screen. So nothing special, you would say. So let me put on the VR headset and let's switch to VR mode to see how that looks like. So here we are with VR. Let me put on the glass correctly. So here we are with VR. And now let's first of course go inside the cockpit. Inside the cockpit you are seeing a lot of nice things. You can see that the gouges are super clear, right? I can come closer, but it's not even necessary to come closer. I can simply move around looking at my, let's say, Copilot. But also let's say turn around now and let's enjoy the scenery. The nice thing about, of course, about this is that I don't need to use that hat on the, I would say, joystick. I can simply move my head and due to the motion sensors it simply moves around with me, which is super cool. Here you can see the city, but let's turn a little bit further because then we're entering that part which we just also flew. And if I would go to the external side, right, you can already see it in front of us. There it is. It looks super cool. So now let's go inside the cockpit, of course, and then we can see that building, right? It's called the Dome. it's over here. You can see that scenery is building up a bit with VR. So it doesn't look that nice, to be honest. It's still building up the scenery, as you can see. Might also be me because I put, I would say, everything to super high. Might have, would say, considered putting it a little bit back to, for example, high instead of ultra. And that's what I'm still experimenting with, right? What are the best settings? So keep an eye on my channel because I will post some new videos about those things. So as you can see, so this is, again, it's really beautiful. So as mentioned, this part of the Netherlands has been updated as part of city update number 14, where they updated this part. You can see the bank building again. And this looks, I would say, super realistic.
Caution, terrain, caution, terrain.
And a nice thing, which I will also cover in a future video, is that you can use the, say, headset from the Pimax Crystal Light to, for example, play all the alerts, but also play the ATC while the engine is still being played via your normal, let's say, speakers. Oh, sorry, that was the microphone. So super nice. So this was the Cessna 172 above one of the cities which has been updated as part of city update number 14. So let's move on to another city with another aircraft. Here we are with the Saab 340. We're located in Sweden. We placed the aircraft at Linköping Airport, Echo Sierra Golf Lima, which is the birthplace where Saab manufactured the aircraft. And we're climbing over the stunning Stockholm archipelago, and then we're flying over the Baltic Sea. At least we're gonna fly part. We're not gonna fly everything. So I'm gonna prepare the aircraft, simply say setting the altitude, so we can switch on the autopilot at one point. And we're gonna start in that 2D scenario, right? Because I simply want to showcase you how it looks like. For those who don't know where the autopilot is, the autopilot can be found here. So that's, I would say, super nice. But also you can search for some time before you figure out. So let me increase the throttling. Here we go. A little bit stuttering. And the Saab 340 is a super nice aircraft. I recorded a complete dedicated series to this aircraft. So if you're, say, interested in more information about the aircraft, but also how to manage the aircraft in Flight Simulator 2024, then have a look at the channel, because there are more videos about this aircraft, a lot of them, to be honest, a whole series. I'm not sure how many videos are recorded, but I think at least 4 or 5 videos where we're gonna look into certain systems of the aircraft. Switch on the autopilot, gives me some, I would say, freedom. Gonna switch on the nav mode, and also making sure that we switch on the vertical speed. And the vertical speed can be managed using this button. So here you can manage the vertical speed, because you don't want to climb too fast, of course. So let me drop it a bit. 700 feet per minute, that looks okay, looks much better. Now the downside of this scenery is that although it looks really beautiful, there are not a lot of fjords, for example, because that's a different area. But we can of course look at the aircraft differences, but also, let's say, look at the outside of the aircraft, because this is the outside of the aircraft. You can see also it looks really nice, but this of course is on, between brackets, a flat monitor. And I'm pretty sure that when I put on my VR headset, it looks much more better. So let me do that. And then, I would say, during putting on my headset, I'm not sure what happened, but it looks like that the aircraft crashed a bit. Might be, I would say, the overpower. It looks like. So let me reduce the power. And that's something I need to warn you about, right? as you saw in my previous video, when switching back to VR or 2D, switching back to VR. One of the things which is between brackets kind of nasty is how the, I would say, aircraft, or at least not how the aircraft, how all works when you're having on the headset. If you're putting on the headset, you might have some issues with the, I would say, buttons, with the controllers. So keep that in mind. Now we need to assure. Oh, I see what happens. You see that nice LED over here, which is called ice protection. That's causing the issue. So let me see. It was over here. And that's also where you can see the nice things, right? Here you can say easily see the buttons. You can switch them on. Hopefully we're not too late, because this aircraft is pretty sensitive. The rest is on. Except the engines. So this is super cool, but it's also super nice that I can showcase this. So here you can see the, let's wait for the autopilot or the 8C to finish its talk. So here you can also see nicely how you can use this functionality. I'm gonna increase the say climb rate, so let's do it. Also, if I look at this, right, I can simply, let's say, move with my mouse. In this case, it's not the most ideal way, I know, but in this case I didn't configure all the settings for this aircraft yet, which I definitely would recommend you to do. And as you can see, now if I look outside, although the scenery hasn't been optimized, it looks super cool, if you ask me. Could be that you're hearing me a little bit, I would say, not so good, because I'm moving around my head, and then I of course lost where my microphone is. And that again is that VR thing, which we discussed in the second video. 250. Oh, you can decrease the altitude here in that case. And this would be super nice if you would be able to control the, I would say, buttons with your hands, right? That would be super nice. I'm moving the microphone a bit, so I hope you can hear me better. But look at this. Look at all those buttons of the aircraft. And you can always reset the view by pressing the shift key if you want to reset it. But also let's go outside of the aircraft. And I'm gonna press the correct button. So this is how it looks like. And look at this. Look at the radio antenna. Look at the surroundings here in Sweden. So we just took off from Linköping Airport, as you can see. Here are some alerts. Oh, that's the altitude. Look at the aircraft itself also. It looks super nice. So I switched on to highest quality, so that's why you might see some micro stuttering happening. I'm still trying to find the optimal settings. I do think that high is better. But hey, let's test it out. And of course I will record new videos about how to optimize the settings, because during these 7 days we use the default, let's say, settings to get started. But of course there are a lot of videos from other YouTubers about how to optimize these settings. But I still need to, let's say, have a closer look at what are my optimal settings. So this is the second flight. Well, if you compare 2D with VR, I think you agree with me that this looks, let's say, much better. Let me switch back to 2D so you can have a look at it and then also compare it. Well, this also looks nice, right? I think you agree with me, but with VR it is such more nicer compared to with the headset on. Now of course there are more aircrafts, so let's jump to the next one. And what the next one is, I'm gonna tell you right now. It's a heavy airliner approach over Los Angeles, using the Airbus A320, so let's jump to it. So here we are above Los Angeles and we're flying using that nice aircraft, the fly-by-wire A320, which is really a recommendation because it's open source. But I'm really wondering how it looks like in 3D when using this aircraft. But also don't forget to look at the scenery. The scenery of course looks super nice, although we're flying pretty high. I'm completely aware of that. So let's, I would say, jump into that VR mode and let's see how it looks like. But before that, maybe let's first look at the inside of the aircraft itself. This is the aircraft itself. You hear a lot of alerts, which is normally not really good. So you can, I would say, look what that is. Gear not down. Yeah, that makes sense because that's also what I wanted. So here we are. So alerts are off. Then the alerts are back on. You can see that, I would say, kind of a little bit, I would say, performance thingy. So with alerts again, we can always drop the gears. Likely because we're below a certain altitude. But while we're flying, let me put on the VR headset and then let's be amazed on how that looks like. So I switch my headset on. So I'm gonna switch now to VR. Takes a few seconds and here we are back in the cockpit. Well, it is a complete immersion, right? It's so nice. I would say controlling the mouse a little bit harder. So I would almost say you need a kind of a panel to do that. Maybe we should simply increase the altitude a bit. And here you can see that still managing the aircraft and managing these small buttons requires some exercising, but hey, I would say it adds so much realism compared to how you would normally fly, because you can see that everything looks super cool. Of course I need to make sure that we're using the correct options over here. Let me, I'd say, try to move the needle of the vertical speed. No, we need to climb, not descend. This is also thingy, right? So it's, say, controlling these options is not really fun in most cases. So let me simply switch off the autopilot so we can climb manually. That will of course result in other alerts, but here we are. So this is what we can see, right? So if we're looking outside, sorry for getting the microphone, we can see the airport. I'm gonna press shift because then it will reset the view. So it's a little bit nicer for me, so I can also watch at the front. You can see that, to say, the aircraft also, I would say, behaves really nice. Although I must say that I likely, as already mentioned, need to shift down or turn down the graphics settings a bit. But overall it works perfect. It adds so much more detail to all the cockpit. So even if you're flying with an airliner, I do think that VR is really almost a must-have to make it more realistic. I think with an airliner, however, the challenge becomes with, for example, the MCDU and other, let's say, panels which you might have. Because I know that a lot of people have those, right? There are several vendors which are delivering those. And then you will need to, say, do it with the fingers and, let's say, trust that you press the right buttons. That might be, I would say, the real, let's say, thing which you could hold you off when using, I would say, VR in this aircraft. But from graphical perspective, I think you'll agree, this looks super cool and super nice. We'll see the joysticks moving over there, right? The aircraft is being controlled by the autopilot. So, super nice. So let's go outside, because we of course also want to see how, in this case, Los Angeles looks like. Of course I switched off the autopilot, so it's not the autopilot, it was simply me. And this is Los Angeles. You can see that Los Angeles also looks super nice from the air. Of course there's some stuttering, but again, as already mentioned, be aware that you might need to tweak your settings for VR perspective, although, say, in my case, I think it's still doable between brackets. I'll likely need to drop it too high, which would make it more fun. But look at this. It simply looks crazy, right? Even if we would move around the aircraft a bit. Look at the heat coming from the engines. And there's the city. And below us you can see the shadow of the aircraft. So now we did fly in a GA aircraft, right, the Cessna 172. Then we jumped to a propeller aircraft, the Saab 340. And now we're in that nice airliner, the A320neo. And we did visit Utrecht, we did visit Sweden, and we visited the US. So let's see what comes next, and let's see how that looks like in 2D on a flat screen, and then jump to virtual reality, so we're watching in 3D. And we move to the other side of the world. We move to Australia and we're flying over the Great Barrier Reef, which has been updated as part of World Update number 21, or at least some part of Australia. Not sure if it was the Great Barrier Reef itself, but Cairns in Australia has been updated, for example. Now, of course, this is a nice aircraft, and for those who don't recognize it, it's the Pilatus PC-12. I can move around, right, if I want. This is, I would say, the view from the co-pilot. This is the view from the pilot, and if I move outside, I can look at this magnificent scenery. You can see that, would say, there is a lot of detail, and of course this looks already super nice in this flat screen view. Imagine how it will look like if we would move to VR. So let's quickly do that. Well, say we're trying not to crash with the aircraft, because of course that's not what we want to do. So I'm gonna put on the VR set again, so let's have a look at it. And here we are with VR. Well, I can tell you this looks super nice. Look at the clouds, look below us, look at the reef. You can see, would say, the different areas of the reef, and of course we've got that Pilatus PC-12. If we look at the aircraft itself, this also is again next level. I can look very close. Well, that was the microphone, so sorry for the bump. And I can also say use this to say have a close look at all the instruments, and this is super nice. I would say if you would normally fly in the PC-12, which I think I also recorded a series about, you will have a lot of fun with it. But with this VR set, it is really again next level, because it gives you so much more, I would say, flexibility. I can look at the instruments. The only thing again which is missing is, I would say, really managing those buttons with your hands. That would be really, I would say, a nice addition. I know Pimax is working on that. I hope that they will say release the beta software really soon, so I can have a close look at that, because that would make it even more fun. Because then that whole control, let's say, nightmare which we discussed in the second video, which I, by the way, also had some workarounds for, that makes it challenging in this aircraft, right? Because there's so much buttons, there's so much screens which you can't say or control easily. It would really add a lot of value if we would have that. Now again, going outside of the cockpit, here we can see the main country of Australia. You can look around here, look at the level of detail of the water. All those would say nice thing, those waves. Look at the clouds. And I think you need to agree, if you love to fly VR, if you love to fly, I would say, or go outside of the aircraft, but also have a lot of, I would say, more detail in the aircraft, then I think we'll all have to agree, VR is really the way to go. The only thing which could prevent you from doing it is maybe, let's say, budget wise, or I would say maybe PC wise, right? Maybe your system is not powerful enough because it requires some, I would say nice GPU, and of course I would say CPU. By the way, I will post those requirements in the description of this video so you can have a close look. Pimax has really a lot of documentation about that, where they really help you deciding what is the best. But they also have a lot of, I would say, guidance on how to set up your PC. So which flight simulator settings, for example, you need to use, which graphic settings you need to use, and what are their, I would say, recommendations about that. So that's super nice. But again, we need to agree. And maybe you disagree, but this adds so much more realism to Flight Simulator 2024. I think I would say I'm sold, to be honest. I'm sold with VR, especially when flying in these areas like this. It adds so much more things. Let's go outside again. Look at this. Look at that island. I can simply move my head, right? And it simply follows my views. It is super nice. And also if I would come closer here, again hit the microphone. Sorry for that, guys and girls who are looking at this. But you can see I can move my head and I can also zoom in if I want. If the microphone was not in front of me, I could have move my head a bit. But enough talked about this Pilates, right? Enough talked about this Pilates, and in the background we can still see the Great Barrier Reef, which is super nice and super detailed. So let's do something completely different, right? We did a lot flying with all kind of aircrafts, but of course we didn't use a helicopter yet. So what do you think? The Cabri G2? Yes, let's do it. So it became a different helicopter. The reason why the Cabri G2 isn't capable of flying on these high altitudes, which make the helicopter crash for some reason. I tried a few times and then I thought, okay, hey, maybe I'm doing something wrong. And then I found out that the Cabri is only certified for a certain altitude, and since the helicopter was higher than that certain altitude, that's the reason it failed. Well, of course, we always have more helicopters like this one in Flight Simulator 2024, so we could also use it. So what I want to do is go to a lower altitude first, not too low of course, and then watch it at nice scenery, which you can see over here. This scenery is part of World Update number, yes, you guessed it correctly, number 22, which updated a lot of national parks within the US, which I would say is super nice if you ask me. Which update or which part 3 is this? Well, that's a good question. It's the It's the Bryce Canyon, which is part of the US National Parks World Update. And we're coming closer to the mountains. We probably need to fly a little bit lower. So let me do that. And here you can see the level of detail. This is simply crazy. So what do you think? Should we switch to VR, which will likely make it even, say, more nicer? I would say, well, let's do it. Let's see how VR looks like. And we're back, but now of course with VR. And I think we all have to agree that this is really what we would like to see. Look at the level of detail. Even if we're flying very low, it still works perfect. I would say there are some stutters, I know, but it still is on the highest resolution which is possible, and also the highest level of quality. I could of course switch to high, but I simply want to see how this works. Also the trees, they are looking super nice. If we look over there, right, we can see a lot of detail. So we're flying very low over the trees. So what if we would say simply go outside? Well, you would see it like this. And this view, I think, is even more amazing. Look at the rotors. Maybe you're getting crazy, sorry for that. I will go to a different view, because I'm also getting, well, need to adjust my view a little bit. So here we go again. Also the heat behind the engines looks also super nice. I'm gonna reduce the power a bit. And look at the helicopter itself. Also super detailed, as you can see. And the mountains below us, super nice. So let's say dive again to a lower altitude. Let's go inside the cockpit to see how that looks like. Also the cockpit, if you look at this, right, look at all the instruments, they're super sharp. I can look at everything, I can look into the mirror, although I don't see much, to be honest. But that might be me. I can look at the, let's say, items above me. Sorry if the sound is a little bit bad, but then I would say move my head. I will correct it hopefully in the, let's say, editing the video. And then we can look at the surroundings here. The surroundings here are super nice. As you can see, also perfectly for flying, for example, VFR using a smaller aircraft. And look at this. In some cases, like in this case, I might want to switch to a lower, I'd say, lower quality, which in some cases makes the flight a little bit more smoother if you ask me. But I still think it's, I would say, between brackets doable, but maybe I should switch. Also here the water, right, all the details. Look at how low we can fly and how much detail we can see. Which we should not watch or hit the trees, of course. But also this. A lot of trees. Yes, I know. More trees and more trees. So let's see if we can, I'd say, go back to the mountains a little bit. Or maybe do a really low flyby. Now we can do that here. I do think at least. So here we go, we can see the shadow, right? You saw it? Look at this. This would also be really cool low on the water, but there's no water here, as you can see. It's really dry. So I think we've seen enough. I think I'm pretty convinced. So let's jump to the conclusion. So let's talk real talk. 7 days later, who is the Pimax Crystal Light actually for? If you're a casual simmer who flies maybe once a week, or if you prefer managing complex airline systems or a secondary monitor while watching YouTube on a third, I would say on your flat screens. VR is an active, highly immersive experience. It isolates you from the real world, and if you like multitasking or running secondary apps on your desktop, it might not be your jam. But if you're a hardcore simmer, if you live for a VFR flight, helicopter operations, or if you want to feel the physical presence of the cockpit in the aircraft like the TBM 930 or a Cessna, this is the golden standard right now. The resolution is so sharp you don't need to zoom in to read the tiny numbers on your Garmin G1000, although you can do it, as you could see in the videos. The colors pop without looking cartoonish, and it removes the barrier between you and the simulator. If you watch this entire 7-day journey and realize you're ready to finally make the jump into true visual clarity, I've got some awesome news. I've partnered up with a team of Pimax to get an exclusive discount just for our community. If you use the code, which you can find in the description of this video, you'll grab a sweet discount on your own Crystal Light. It's a great way to support the channel and upgrade your setup at the same time. Going back to a flat screen is tough, but luckily I don't have to stay here. I'm plugging this headset back in. Let me know in the comments, are you Team VR or are you sticking to your monitors? Thanks for watching and hope to see you back next time.